Hello, welcome back to the State of Baker, where we have the conversations that polite society does not want us to have. And hopefully through structured conversation and debate, we can spread a little bit of knowledge and understanding about the world around us. As always, I encourage everyone to get involved in your local government and politics. Today we're going to be talking about critical race theory. But before we get to it, I want to give a special thanks out to Abigail McKinney. She's a great individual that I've been talking with here lately, and you can follow her on Telegram, the Libertarian Republican. So myself and Abigail were talking the other day, and we came across the topic of education and why critical race theory seems to be the most talked about topic within education these days, especially when it involves our public school system. We realized that no one had really given a really good definition about critical race theory, and no one really understands how we got to this point of critical race theory being taught in our schools as opposed to just normal science, math, history, speech. Instead, they're teaching critical race theory. How not to be a racist. Well, I got to digging, and I found that Charlie Kirk actually gave a really good definition of it. So I'm not reiterate what he said. I'll include a link to his video. I don't really find any value in just reiterating what somebody else said. We just become an echo chamber. So instead, I want to use their words against them. And what I mean by that is that while researching, I came across the book that was written in 2001, that was written by Richard Delgado and Gene Stefanik, called Critical Race Theory, An Introduction. And I have wasted 4 hours of my life reading this book. And I still got to go back through and reread it just so I can get all the points out of it that I want. This would be like the first video out of a series because there's a lot of stuff that we need to unpack, right? And the first thing you have to understand is that critical race theory is a derivative of the Marxist critical theory. Marxist being communism, aka the Communist Manifesto, right? So, critical theory is the idea that your government is bad and your economy is bad and the entire system is corrupt and meant to keep the poor poor and the people in power still in power, right? The bourgeoisie versus the proletariat. However, in communism, and the biggest problem that I have with communism and most socialist ideologies is that you remove the self factor, right? You remove the individual choice factor because you're saying that the proletariat, the poor people, the common people, the middle class does not exist. You have the upper class and you have the lower class, right? So anybody who's not in the upper class, they're in the lower class. You remove any sort of responsibility or choice from the lower class because you're telling them essentially you're not going to win in life because the government's stacked against you. Your laws are stacked against you. Your government and your laws and your system will never allow you social mobility or economic mobility. And what I mean by that is you will never go from poor, lower class to the middle class or to the upper class. You know what system does allow you to do that? Capitalism and democracy. What we have here in the United States. It's amazing, right? The two things, capitalism and democracy, which give, the most people in the world, like everybody in the world wants to come to the United States. How many Americans want to go anywhere else? There's so many Americans that have never left their home state. I don't see anybody crossing South America to go to Venezuela. I don't see anybody trying to, build a raft, float across the Rio Grande, or pay a coyote to get them to Venezuela. Nope. No one's, risking life and limb to send their children to Russia or China, but they all want to come to America. Why? Because our system works. Now, there is a very strong case being made that, due to the increase and uptick in social welfare, that is a strong financial incentive for people to risk their life to come to America. And I don't agree with it, but we'll get to that a little bit later. But sticking with critical race theory, right? So the Marxist critical theory, you'll never do anything with your life, and you need to blame the government and you need to blame the system. That's what you get with communism, Communist Manifesto. That's what it boils down to. Critical race theory, as described by Richard Delgado and Gene Stefanik, is the exact same thing, except it's not trying to keep you poor necessarily. It's because of your race. Your government's bad, your economy is bad, your education is bad, and your laws are bad because of racism. Okay, so again, you remove any liability on the individual, you remove any choice from the individual, you remove any consequence of action from the individual, and just attribute everything to the government, the economy, and the laws. So that's critical race theory in a nutshell. So in Delgado's and Stefanik's critical race theory, an introduction, they gave 6 tenets. Now, I'm not going to cover every single tenet, but I do want to cover some of the main points that I feel like are very important. Because if you got rid of all the others and just left that one or two, it's the same thing. That's the tenet that they're going to follow. 1, race is socially constructed, not biologically natural. Now, I don't completely disagree with this tenet, and this is why I left it up here. Because the tenet says that a society had to classify people differently, so they created race, and they made boxes. So you're black, you're white, you're Hispanic, you're, Asian, you are, Scandinavian, you're American. They create all these boxes. You're man, you're woman, you are gay, you are straight, you are transgender. There's all these boxes that they created for people to fit in, to identify people, right? And from critical race theory, that's a social construct. And I agree with that. Race is not biologically, it's a construct. Now, the color of your skin, the pigment of your skin is biological. You can't change that, right? But the boxes that society creates is a social construct. When in America, we could just say, hey, there is no race. You are an American. Okay, now, 2 boxes, well, depending on how you look at it, 1 box or 2 boxes that do matter is male, female. That is a biological distinction that needs to be made and needs to be solidified. Are you male or are you female? Because the way a doctor looks at a human being will depend on are you male or are you female, because it's biological and it does matter. Now, some of the diseases that affect one race over another, okay, I get where you're going there, but is that a characteristic that needs to be across all society? Or is it just there for medical purposes? Let a doctor figure that one out. But as far as society goes, you don't need the color of your skin does not need to be a box. Just check American, be done. Race in the United States is normal, not abnormal. I completely disagree with this one because to say that racism in today's age, in 2021, to say that racism is normal, I think is heinous. It's insane. We went through a civil war in the 1860s. We went through a civil war. 500,000 men died, mostly white men died trying to fight. We hashed it out. The southern states left due to slavery. It's in their articles of succession. We're a slave-holding state leaving the Union because we want to protect our right to hold slaves. Now, again, please go look at my video of racism in America, and I go into that a lot. But as far as critical race theory goes, 1860, 160 years ago, we fought a civil war over this. Okay, yeah, no reparations needed there, bud. And then, now granted, it didn't end there. I get it. 1960s, we had the Civil Rights Movement. Almost 100 years after the Civil War, we had a Civil Rights Movement to end Jim Crow laws, started by Democrats, and to end segregation, done by Democrats. Okay, hey, so that's great. Civil rights, bam, ended desegregation. And to say that racism does not exist would be ignorant. But to say that it's commonplace in everyday society, that every single person, every single minority goes through and experiences racism on a daily basis, I do not agree with that. I have a hard time seeing that when everybody likes to say that America is to say that America is immigrant. You know, I feel like that's a stretch, right? You're painting with a giant brush that you do not need to be painting with. Interest convergence and legal social advances setbacks for people of color serve the interests of dominant white groups. Okay, again, I left this up here because look at the Democrats. It just came out today. Today is June 30th. It just came out today. The Democrats are backtracking on defund the police. Why? Because they defunded the police. There's like 24 cities, I believe. 24 cities defunded the police. And they defunded the police, and guess what happened? Crime rate shot through the roof. Now they're having to backtrack. So BLM, due to George Floyd and some of the other minority members that were killed by cops, not hashing why they were killed by cops, just saying that because they were killed by cops, BLM got up there, started rioting, started protesting, and all these police, all these Democrats, all these mayors and politicians got on board. Interest convergence, baby. They got on board and they started carrying that flag and running down the field with it. They did, man. They defunded the police and crime skyrocketed. Cause and effect. I don't know I mean, conservatives try to tell them. Common sense people try to tell them, don't do that. It's a bad idea. All the cops said, don't do that. That's a bad idea. What happened? They did it. Now they're trying to backtrack it, and Jim Pulaski, whatever her name is, the redhead talking mouth for Biden, is up there trying to blame Republicans and conservatives for it. Give me a break. Anyways, back to critical race theory. So these are the tenets, and there's 3 more tenets up here. I'm not going to really go into them because they're kind of long, and you can read them. I'm going to leave the slide up for a little bit while I talk, but you get the idea, right? That's what critical race theory is about. And it's some of the examples that Delgado and Stefanik gave and throughout their book was bear with me on this one, right? So one of the examples they give to like exemplify their argument for systemic racism is the story about 2 men walking down the street. One guy sees a homeless man on the side of the street and makes a comment. He's like, oh, that dirty homeless person, why doesn't he just go get a job? The second individual stops and says, hey, that's bad. You can't say that. You might have hurt his feelings. Who are you to judge their circumstances and why they're poor and why they're sleeping on a bench? So the first individual who made the comment comes back and goes, you're right. I just won't voice my opinions about it in front of you because you're upset. So they try to make the point that you can tell someone not to be ignorant or a bigot or a racist, but it's not going to change the fabric of their being. So they argue that racism and stereotypes still exist no matter how many times you tell someone not to do it. So then they change the story a little bit and say, hey, what if an alien race came down to Earth, talked to the man who was offended and said, hey, I'll give you 2 pills. You can either end racism or you can end financial inequality today. What does the guy pick? Well, the guy picks racism. He takes the racism pill, puts it in the water supply. Everybody drinks it, and the next day, everybody's hunky-dory. But they make the argument that even though you change the way people think and act, the system is still in place that's going to keep people either poor or separated by race or disadvantaged due to their race, right? That's the whole point of the story. So how do you fix that? Well, just like in the Communist Manifesto, the only way to fix it is to tear down the system and start all over. And this is what they're teaching in our schools. They're shaming people. They're shaming our children into believing that they are inherently bad, that a white kid is inherently a racist because he's white and he enjoys white privilege, which, by the way, there's no way to prove white privilege. Good luck with that. But anyways, they go through and they're trying to unpack everything and unload it all on our children in an effort to brainwash our children. Now, brainwash or change the way they think, however you want to put it, whatever makes you feel good at night. The goal is the same, to change the way our children think and act. Why? Because our children are our future. Any educator or any person who cares about their child will tell you They want the best for their children, and they want to make sure that their children are well informed and educated, because in their future, they will dictate the rules, policies, and government. That's why they're going after our children in schools. And that's why all these parents are mad. This topic of critical race theory in our schools, and we were trying to figure out, okay, why is it bad? And I think we've answered that, right? Well, then another question came, was like, well, how did this ever get started in our schools? Like, what actually came down? Like, is this part of Common Core? Is this federally enacted? Is this Common Core? Or did this come about some other way? And I think I may have found the answer. So while digging through this, we got talking about teachers' unions. Now, a union in and of itself that does its sole function, the sole function of a union is to be a representation of the workers or the people that union represents. Again, it's a socialistic policy. It's a socialist idea. And ideally, it's not a bad thing. However, just like any socialist policy or any socialist construct, when you do that, when you give up your individual rights, liberty, and freedom and power to a group, you now become a part of that group, and you are going in whatever direction that group decides to push you in. In the case of North Carolina's Association of Educators, which their news bulletin is up here on the screen, they're pushing you towards critical race theory. And it is entirely throughout their news bulletin. I was shocked when I found this. I was floored. So this lends me to believe, based off everything I'm reading here, that it's not, yes, the colleges that teach the schools and the colleges that teach our teachers are to blame, yes. And that started back in the 1960s around the Civil Rights Movement, when the critical race theorists came around during the Cold War. There's a connection that we'll talk about here in a minute. So they came around and they started introducing this critical race theory. Well, eventually it caught on, got enough support, and all of these people became, well, not all of them, but a majority of these people became professors and started teaching in colleges and started educating young minds, which bred more people who believed in critical race theory. If you look at the majority of all of our law schools, they teach some form of critical race theory as it applies to laws. I mean, Richard Delgado and Stefanik are both lawyers. So going through this article, my attention immediately got caught by this member spotlight article, Sam Ball, right? Now remember what I said, unions are good if they're doing what they're supposed to do, which is representing the teachers, the people that are paying them to represent them. They're bad when they start pushing that group of people in a political direction that is not in their interest. And what I mean by that is they're not just advocating for more money for teachers or more money for school supplies. They're advocating for social justice. So Mr. Sam Bald, under the member spotlight, says, I get really fired up when we talk about politics and education. Many educators keep coming back to this idea of, I don't do politics. But if you're an educator, your job is political. Either you get involved or you let other people make decisions for you, and that's where the union can help. Right under that, SLC 2021, building our union and taking back our state. It's politics, baby. That's all it is. All of it. Politics. Now, NCAE, North Carolina Association of Educators, control about 20%. They have about 20% of the educators in North Carolina. Well, if you keep going through this, the next page says NEA offers Season of Justice 2021. So if you ever wonder what your teachers are doing during the summer, take a look at this. And this will tell you exactly what they're doing. The Center of Social Justice is pleased to announce NEA Season of Justice 2021, a series of virtual engagements running between June and August, designed to deepen knowledge, build connections, and engage in a collective and meaningful conversation on racial and social justice. Come on, man. I can't make this up. Recently, I was listening out there, like MSNBC or ABC, and they were talking about the critical race theory and how, oh my God, that's not a thing. Are you crazy? Who would believe that we were teaching critical race theory? Dude, it's right there. All you gotta do is look. So I want to give a special shout out to Miss Amy Marshall, president of North Carolina Teachers Alliance. Now again, remember what I said, unions are good when they do what they're supposed to. Represent the teachers. Miss Amy Marshall is doing just that. I believe it was March of this year. March of this year, she created Carolina Teachers Alliance. They're going through, and it's the alternative to the NCAE. Thank God. And Miss Amy Marshall says that the Carolina Teachers Alliance is the voice of Carolina educators, empowering members to provide the highest quality, unbiased, and achievement-driven education to all children. You can look them up, carolinateachers.org. So as we've gone through and we've talked about critical race theory, by all means, please leave a comment, like, subscribe. Help me unpack this, right? If you're an educator and you want more information about Miss Marshall's Teachers Alliance, feel free, reach out. I gave you the website, carolinateachers.org. Go look it up, man. Her contact information is up there. You can get in touch with the Alliance, give them a ring, let them know your thoughts and feelings, any comments that you have. If you don't agree with what I said, by all means, there's a comment button, baby. Hit it, let me know. I mean, this is the only way that you're going to change my mind is by telling me. And right now, everything I'm seeing, this is a really bad idea. In the future, I will be talking to educators in the Eastern North Carolina region, getting their thoughts, opinions, and a little bit better, like firsthand understanding of how this affects children, what they've seen from other teachers, what they've seen from the NCAE union, and trying to understand where this is going to go, right? We're starting to see a lot of the backlash in our own country and society from this already. I mean, if you look at, there's a court case, I believe it was in New York, where a judge dismissed a murder trial involving a gun. You never would think this was possible. She dismissed a murder trial involving a gun because she thought that the jury was not an accurate representation of the demographic. Essentially, she was saying there's too many white people in the jury, so she dismissed the trial completely. That's funny, considering that there's a BLM member on Mr. Chauvin's trial in the murder of George Floyd. That case didn't get tossed out. So we're seeing this unequal application of justice. Look, this is going to end bad. Please look at the video I made, Racism in America. Just read a book. Don't listen to what they're saying in the news. Look for information, or at least read between the lines of what they're saying. Good God. Use some common sense, man, critical thinking. I get it. They don't teach it in schools now anymore, but please seek information and understand what's going on in the world around you. Leave me a comment, subscribe, let me know. If you got it, and just like I did with Abigail's, the discussion I had with Abigail. If there's a topic you want me to cover, leave a comment, let me know. I'll research it and we'll talk about it. I will be putting a part 2 to this after I talk with some of these educators and get their opinions on it. And maybe I can get some, I don't know, maybe like a one-on-one interview and some, firsthand accounts up here. But yeah, we're moving forward with this. This is a big topic. This is our children. Our children's lives are at stake. The future of our country is at stake. This is not something that you can just take lying down. We have to oppose this any way we can. Peacefully, obviously. But, I mean, there's I'll try to find the actual incident and put it in the description. But there's an incident during I think it was a Board of Education meeting. They arrested a parent. They arrested a parent for calling the board out on their crap and telling them that they shouldn't be teaching critical race theory. They were asked to leave. He refused. Why? Because that's his kid. That is the school. Those are the teachers teaching his child. His tax dollars pay them. And you're going to tell him, you're going to arrest him. That's communism. You cannot arrest someone for telling you not to teach their child something that they don't agree with. You can't do that. Anyways, hey, thank you for watching State of Baker. Leave a comment, like, subscribe. See you on the flip side.